Some rulers were feared, some were respected. But this king, he was something else. He didn't just punish his enemies, he watched them suffer, slowly, carefully, deliberately. Pain wasn't justice to him, it was entertainment. Courts became theaters, punishments became spectacles, and the man on the throne never looked away. When he first took power, the kingdom expected strength, leadership, stability, order, and at first that's what they saw. The king was decisive, unpredictable, but effective. Enemies were dealt with quickly. Rebellions were crushed before they could grow. But something about his rule felt different. There was a pattern, subtle at first. Punishments began to last longer. Public displays became more frequent. Executions more elaborate. It wasn't just about maintaining control anymore. It was becoming something else. The court started to notice. Nobles whispered behind closed doors. Servants avoided eye contact, because during these punishments, the king didn't turn away. He leaned forward, watching closely, as if every moment mattered, as if he was studying it, or worse, enjoying it. The courtyard transformed over time. What was once a place for royal announcements became a stage for suffering. Crowds were gathered, guards held order, and at the center, someone always paid the price. But the most unsettling part wasn't the punishment itself. It was the silence from the throne. No emotion, no hesitation, just observation. And slowly a realization spread across the kingdom. This wasn't justice. This was something far more disturbing. Because the king didn't just want obedience, he wanted control. Over fear, over pain, over life itself. And once that kind of power takes hold, it doesn't stop. At first, the people told themselves it was necessary, a harsh king for a dangerous time. But slowly the line began to blur. Punishments were no longer quick. They were extended, deliberate, public. The courtyard filled more often now, not just with guards and officials, but with citizens. They were ordered to watch, to witness what happened to those who disobeyed. At the center stood the condemned, and above them, on a raised throne, the king. He didn't shout orders, he didn't rage, he simply watched, every movement, every reaction, as if the suffering itself held meaning or value. Rumors spread quickly. Some said he demanded certain punishments be repeated. Others claimed he gave specific instructions, not for justice, but for effect. Longer pauses, slower outcomes, more visible pain. Even the executioners began to change. Their actions became more controlled, more precise, not out of mercy, but because they were being observed, judged by someone who expected a performance. The atmosphere shifted. Crowds stopped reacting. No cheering, no noise, just silence. Because everyone understood this wasn't for them. It was for him. And once that realization took hold, fear deepened. Not just of punishment, but of being chosen. Because now it wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about presence, being seen, being noticed. And in a kingdom ruled by a man who found meaning in suffering, that was the most dangerous thing of all. No one truly understood when it began or why. Because outside the courtyard, the king was different, calm, measured, almost distant. In private chambers, he spoke softly, gave orders without emotion, showed no signs of rage or instability. That's what made it more disturbing. There was no madness to blame, no visible chaos, only control, absolute control. Those closest to him began to notice small details. He asked questions, strange ones, not about justice, but about reactions. How long did he resist? When did he break? Did he beg? It wasn't curiosity, it was interest, calculated, cold. Servants whispered about his presence during punishments, how he never looked away, how his posture never changed, how his eyes followed every movement, as if he was learning something or searching for something. Some believed it was about power. Others thought it was boredom, a ruler with nothing left to conquer, turning inward. But a few feared something deeper, that he wasn't watching for control, he was watching for feeling, because nothing else seemed to move him, not victory, not wealth, not loyalty, only suffering. And over time, that became clear to everyone around him. The court grew quieter. The advisors spoke less, because the king didn't need counsel. He had found something else, a twisted kind of satisfaction. And once that became part of his rule, it changed everything. Because a king who rules with fear is dangerous, but a king who finds meaning in pain is something far worse. Over time, the kingdom changed, not in ways that could be easily seen, but in the way people lived, spoke, moved, thought. The streets grew quieter. Conversation stopped when guards passed. Eyes stayed lowered. Voices became careful, controlled, because no one knew what might draw attention, and attention had become dangerous. The punishments continued, regular, predictable, almost routine, but that didn't make them easier to accept. If anything, it made them worse, because now people expected them, feared them, lived around them. Families warned their children, stay quiet, don't stand out, don't be noticed. Not because of laws, but because of him. The king didn't need to speak anymore. His presence was enough. Every public display reinforced the same message. Anyone could be next. And the court? It became a place of silence. Advisors agreed quickly. Nobles avoided disagreement. No one challenged him, because they had seen what happened to those who did. Even the guards, once confident in their authority, became cautious, because power in this kingdom didn't come from position, it came from proximity, how close you were to the king's attention, and how quickly that attention could turn. There were no rebellions, no open resistance, not because the people were loyal, but because they were afraid, completely. The kingdom still functioned. Markets opened, work continued, life moved forward, but underneath it all, there was a constant tension, a silent understanding shared by everyone. This wasn't rule. This was control through fear. And as long as the king remained on the throne, that fear would never leave. In the end, there was no dramatic collapse, no sudden rebellion, no single moment where everything changed, because fear doesn't break all at once. It fades, slowly, quietly. And when the king's rule finally came to an end, the kingdom didn't celebrate. It exhaled. For years, people had lived in silence, measured their words, watched their steps. Now they simply stood still, as if unsure whether it was truly over. The throne that once held absolute power sat empty, but its shadow remained, because what the king created wasn't just fear, it was memory. Stories passed in whispers, warnings told across generations, not about war, not about enemies, but about a ruler who found meaning in suffering. And that memory changed how people saw power. Future rulers were judged differently, questioned more closely, watched more closely, because the kingdom had learned something the hard way. Power without limits becomes something else, something dangerous, something inhuman. Historians would later debate his rule. Was he cruel by nature or shaped by power itself? But for those who lived through it, the answer didn't matter. They remembered the silence, the fear, the stillness of the crowd, and the man who sat above it all, watching, always watching, because in the end, his greatest impact wasn't the punishments he ordered, it was the way he changed how people lived. And long after he was gone, that fear echoed.